Welcome. We're on the red couch for our Civil Rights series with Sharon Robinson, renowned author of both fiction and nonfiction works, including several widely praised books about her father, baseball legend Jackie Robinson. Her latest book, Under the Same Sun, was recently released by Scholastic. Sharon is also the educational consultant for Major League Baseball. She manages Breaking Barriers in Sports in Life, a baseball-themed national character education curriculum that helps empower students to face obstacles in their own lives. Since 1997, the program has reached over 22 million students and 2.9 million educators. Sharon, I am thrilled to have you on the red couch.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. Finally, Rachel, we've been trying to do this for a long time.
I know. Well, I've been waiting as patiently as possible.
You have to be patient.
So tell me, what was it like to grow up with one of the most extraordinary historical figures? What was it like to have him be your dad?
You know, Rachel, my parents worked very hard to keep our home life as normal as possible. In fact, even our move to Stamford, Connecticut when I was 5 was so that we would have land and privacy so that we could explore nature. My mother was big into nature and my father just wanted the space. So, you know, they really worked hard to have that normal. Then we also understood once we went out in public, then we were a public family. So it's the normal stuff of, or not normal stuff of eating dinner out at a restaurant and people coming up and asking your dad for their autograph, and also they wanted to tell him a story usually.
Like what?
Well, they all have even today, people have had a wonderful experience at Ebbets Field.
Right.
You know, I can't imagine, the whole world seems to have gone to Ebbets Field, you know, in the 40s. So
yep.
They all have stories either from their childhood or with a parent or a grandparent who took them there, and they're very special and they want to share it with you. So the same thing with my dad, only they'd want to also talk about, you know, him stealing home in the 1955 World Series, or was he really safe or out, and you know, with you know, so you know, some story like that. So you know, and we understood that you had to be a balance. You have family time and then you have public time.
So, but as a dad, I mean, were you in awe of him, or was it just, it's my dad?
No, I was in awe. I was in awe of him, but not for the reasons you probably think. You know, I thought he was a very big man, physically. He was, you know, now I realize he was 5'11" and a half. You know, and my son was 6'4", so, you know, and I thought he wore really big shoes. He wore a size 12. You know, again, my son wore a size 16. So it's, you know, but as a child, I, you know, saw him as sort of larger than life.
Yeah.
In our home, we had a room that was his, for all his trophies and his awards. And we actually passed through that on our way to our playroom. Huh. So it wasn't like a normal walk to your playroom, you know. And if you had friends with you, they had to stop and look over everything, you know. And you had your favorite things that, you know, you'd love. My favorite, I always loved his football cleats from UCLA. And
That's right.
And there's the other favorite of mine was the silver bats. So to this day, if a player gets a silver bat, I'm like, oh, I love them.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
And he was really, I had read, I don't know if it's true, was he really very competitive? Like, I know you guys used to play Monopoly and board games. And
he was very competitive. And you're right, he didn't play down to us because we were kids. So after dinner, we would have card games, and on weekends, it would be the Monopoly. And sports-wise, you know, he didn't play competitive sports with us. You know, we allowed us to do that on our own. He would sometimes come out and join us.
Yeah.
So football, baseball games, you know, or on our front lawn, and he would be a part of that. But he didn't get super competitive because that could be trouble.
Yeah. So I was thinking, if my dad was, you know, involved with really changing the tone of for all of Americans, I mean, he changed it for all Americans, I would be a little worried about him, like his safety. Was that ever an issue for you or your mom?
Very much so.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have the baseball worries because I was not born the first couple of years.
Right.
But when my dad retired from Major League Baseball, he had a job with Chock-full Nuts, but he also worked in the civil rights movement, and that was a safety issue for me. I thought the South was a very threatening place because I was watching it on television and it looked threatening.
Yeah.
You know, my brothers and I were integrating our schools, and we had integrated our neighborhood in Stamford, Connecticut. There was nothing like what we were seeing in the South with dogs and hoses and people and mobs, and it was very frightening. So I was always really happy when my dad came back home safely, because I didn't understand that world. And he brought us in, so he sort of wanted to close that gap between what he was doing down south and what was our world in the north. And he closed the gap, and when I was about 13, it just so happened that it was just before the March on Washington.
All right.
My father had just met Dr. King, and he came home, and at our dinner table, he was talking about his travels. But he said that, now we as a family are going to be involved in the civil rights movement, and, it became part of our life up north. And we started having jazz concerts to raise money, and we went on marches together as a family. So we did the March on Washington as a family. And
so you had an actual, I know he supported each of you to fulfill your own dreams, but you also had a family mission.
We had a family mission.
Yeah.
Which was actually wonderful, because it set up a lifetime.
Absolutely.
And so when my dad died, I was a senior in college, and my mother the next year founds the Jackie Robinson Foundation, and that became part of our mission. But we each had, I was very involved in women's health issues, and
you were a nurse.
I was a nurse, and I was a nurse midwife. Yeah, so very very much involved in that, and we were defining women and our role and our evolving role in society, and our strength as women, and part of that strength was defining how we were going to give birth to our babies.
Exactly.
And
right.
How we would be in control of our lives. So it was a very interesting period to be involved in healthcare.
You've written several books about your dad's life, and beautiful books. I can't wait to share the most recent one, talk more about it. What do you hope that the impact, if these books could get into the hands of all children everywhere, that would be my dream. But what do you hope would be the impact that the stories will have on future generations?
Well, I'm a storyteller. And so my story is why I've written multiple books about my dad, because I generally don't write a biography, although I have done that as well for children. But I like to tell stories, and my stories usually have a message that, of overcoming some obstacle, so it ties right in with the work I do with Major League Baseball and Scholastic. So I think what I hope children will get is that, life has these hills and valleys, and we meet challenges along the way, but we can get over them, and there'll be periods when we're very happy and periods when we're sad, and sometimes we'll be successful and sometimes we'll make mistakes, but that's all part of life. And when you put a life together, it involves, all of the good and the bad, get put into that life.
It's easy, because it's easy for kids, I think, to just see kind of the glory or the glamour of a life of professional sports or something, and to see the real person. I really appreciate how you've done that. And my favorite, Jackie's 9, the values to live by.
That was my, the 9 values. And when I started working for Major League Baseball and was doing my research, I kept coming up with 9 as a common denominator. And so when I was putting together the values that I associate with my dad on and off the field, I had to come up with 9 of them, and so Jackie's 9 grew out of the program we do, and it really is an anthology, a collection of stories about my life, about my dad's life, about a man or woman who has experienced something that shows the value. Because I don't believe in teaching values by reciting them. I really you teach values by through life.
What are some of the values that you, just a few to share, to speak about, of the 9?
Courage, integrity, persistence, determination, teamwork, working together with people, excellence. You know, you're all striving towards excellence. You know, commitment. You have to. It's something we all have to work on. And there's commitments on various levels. But you know, I want kids to know that they should be able to find commitment in their life and stick with it. And family, you know, family is not one of the 9 values, but certainly is a thread in all of my work.
Right.
And something I hold dear.
Absolutely. I love the Breaking Barriers essay contest.
Yes.
You do. And I know that there's been incredible stories. So it's grades, is it 4 through 8?
It's actually 4 through 9 now. Yes, we had one incredible young woman who none of us could let go. And she was an 8th grader when she won the contest. And so when I introduced her to the commissioner, he had the same reaction we did, and he gave her a job.
Oh, wow.
She now works for Major League Baseball. She's a writer for MLB.com.
Come on.
Yeah, she's now a junior in high
fabulous.
school. Her name is Maggie Zanis. And, you know, Maggie's story was so amazing, but it's really her that grabs you.
Yeah.
You know. So we had to add the 9th grade in because we were going to her school to acknowledge her in this new job she had with Major League Baseball. But by now then she was a 9th grader, so we're like, oh, another transition year. Let's just bring 9th graders in. So actually, we are about to. They won't even tell me how many essays. Scholastic was still counting last I heard. Last year we had 18,500 essays from kids all over the country. And I have a feeling that we surpassed that this year because Scholastic's being so tight-lipped. However, they have to let us know by Friday because we will get the 100 finalists, and that's 6 of us from baseball, Scholastic, and a couple of other partners like Microsoft will, and Arm & Hammer will go on and read these essays, and then we'll have a judging session.
For the final 100.
Yeah, for the final 100, and then I go out and start my school visits. So it's a real exciting time for me. I get to meet the kids and give them laptops and computers and books and T-shirts for the whole class. But then we go over to a ballpark, and they have that ballpark experience. And 2 of them, the grand prize winners, one goes to the World Series with me, and one joins me at the All-Star game. So it's quite special.
I wish I was in 4th through 8th grade or 9th grade. Could write a great essay.
Yeah.
What are some of the stories? Or do you want to share Maggie's?
I'll tell you, Maggie was a young woman who was born with a rare neurological condition where she feels no pain. And you know, with any of these conditions, there's multiple things that have gone wrong in her body or go wrong. And so she'd had 14 surgeries in 14 years, and she really had some physical limitations in her life that didn't allow her to play sports. However, she became a baseball historian.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And she loves to write, and she's a very, very good writer. So she sort of channeled her love for sports and baseball in particular into and had a blog about the Cincinnati Reds, and so it was just and you know, so her whole point of her essay is, you know, she just can't even focus on what she can't do. She just focuses on what she can do and just be stronger and better at those things. Last year we had our grand prize winner from a little boy from, and sometimes it's funny because sometimes the kids are real baseball fans and sometimes they don't know anything about baseball. So we had Luke, and another Luke. Luke was in 5th grade when he won, and his father was in the Army, so I actually met him at West Point.
Oh, wow.
And since then they've transferred to another state, I forgot which one. But Luke was born with cerebral palsy, but he had a mild form of it, but he was told that he couldn't ride a bike without training wheels, you know, he couldn't do this. The doctor gave him a whole list of things that he would never be able to do, and he said, well, I am not going to ride my bike with training wheels. I want to have my training wheels off. So he and his mother spent 2 years, literally, going up to this grassy hill and Luke practicing until he was able to ride his bike without training wheels.
That's great.
And in his essay, he wrote about, you know, jump roping was another issue because of the coordination that's required in jump rope.
Right.
He wasn't able to do it, and he kept at it. And so in his essay, he said, I'm now up to 53 times, you know. And then when he read his essay to the whole 5th grade and at West Point, he said, you know, actually I'm up to 63 now. You know, so he added another 10. It was so cute. But the kids write about everything. So it's not all, it can be physical issues or it can be social. So we had another grand prize winner who was being bullied around color, and she was a young girl from India, and a brown-skinned girl, and so she, was dealing with that in her. And the bullying was actually happening around her ballet class, and that was, she loved to dance, and she wasn't going to let them stop her from dancing, and so. And then we get other social issues. We've had kids that have lost a parent through death or sometimes violence or a grandparent. So they've had to deal with loss, and so just the whole gamut of social issues.
So they choose one of the 9 values.
They have to describe in their essay what they have had to overcome or
Right.
what they're dealing with,
Okay.
and then they have to go from that into how they're using one or more of the 9 values to get to the next level,
Right.
or to overcome their obstacle.
Right.
So it's not. We don't want them to stop at I have this problem but really move beyond that and show how they're dealing with it.
It's a really wonderful
Yeah.
idea.
Well, we've had I have one little boy that I think about all the time. Sometimes some of these. The traumas that our kids have to face in their young lives. And this one little boy was a 5th grader that he hasn't kept up with me. We give him our email address so they can write to us.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always happen, and so I worry about how he's managing today. So one of our big projects is we've got to find a way to do some follow-up on these kids and see where they're at today.
I really love the whole idea.
Yeah, and it's incredible to be working for a corporation, working for Major League Baseball, the commissioner of baseball, and be able to do basically a nonprofit work.
Exactly. That's like the coolest thing.
So it couldn't be
exactly.
It
I love
is.
it.
I'm just. My dad told me to find work I love, but I had no idea that twice in my life, one from midwifery and then into working with kids through the program with baseball and through my writing, that have these, whole lifetime of just loving my work. So I don't really feel like I'm working. It's
brilliant.
Very, very much mission driven.
One of the values you were talking about was courage. And obviously your dad had to have tremendous amounts of courage, and I love the book Testing the Ice. It's such a great book about. I don't want to give it all away, but it's an example of your dad's
courage. Right, at home and as well as the ballpark, right?
But was there any specific time in your life growing up with your dad that you thought that really is amazing? Like, that's just so much courage just to be able to withstand whatever difficulty. I mean, there's a million examples, but was there anything that kind of stands out in your mind?
Well, yeah, I watched my dad struggle with diabetes as I watched my son struggle with it. And with my father, so I was in college. I guess I was like, when it got really bad for him, I was already in college mostly, some in high school. But he got to the point where he really couldn't see, and so they were starting to do laser therapy, and my dad, we were on vacation in Jamaica, and my dad gets a note from has a call from his doctor saying, "I need you to come now. We want to do this laser on your eye," and it was a really big deal because it was offering him the promise of being able to see again.
Wow.
So he flies back, and we end the vacation early, and they do the laser, and it actually blinded him. So he became blind, completely blind in one eye, and had partial vision in the other eye. So I remember one time he took me to the Apollo Theater. We were there for one of the shows, and he went upstairs to see Peter Long up in the offices, and Peter was his good running buddy, and they laughed a lot together. And he came back down, and he was standing at the end of the aisle, and he was trying to find me.
Oh, wow.
And I realized he couldn't see me. So, I stood up and, walked and helped him in. But I thought about, the kind of courage it takes to having gone from this great athlete and with such ability, and then to watch his body betraying him in a way, through the side effects of diabetes. And, when it happened to my son, it made me more sensitive to it, because now, I was seeing it another generation happening, and they both had really severe diabetes. And, when it happened to my dad, I was shocked at the side effects and shocked at, when he died. I just didn't expect him to die suddenly and so young.
Yeah.
And yet with my son, when I saw it, I was like able to put myself not just as his mother, but, think about it medically and what's going on with him, and realize that, this is how seriously sick he was. So.
Right. Your whole family is so strong, all of you. I mean, I'm just amazed. Like your mom.
Yeah.
I watch your mom on, I've never met her, but I feel like I know her just because every time I call you, you're there with her. And she seems like an incredible pillar of strength.
She absolutely is. And she, both my parents told us really young that struggle is a part of life.
Yeah.
And that we have to stay in the struggle and you have to keep going. And, we lost my brother when he was 24, and, I watched my mother crumble and then get back up. And, my father, so very sick, and, watched him continue to push and go to work and, go play golf, and nothing really stopping him completely. And so I entered my own trials and life traumas. I had that model of, and they both were very strong, but my mother is an incredibly strong woman. She's 91 and a half. And she gets knocked down, but she gets back up.
She's a beautiful woman in
She
every
is.
possible way. And your new book, Under the Same Sun, was written in honor of her 85th birthday.
Absolutely. I tease my mother.
She's great.
Not so much a tease, because she'd say to me, I wrote all these books about my dad, and she goes, well, did you have a mother? So I finally said, Mom, this one is for you, and she's so proud of it. And interestingly enough, it's how she's managed to keep our family together across great distances. And so she is right now at 91 and a half in Tanzania, East Africa.
Which is where the book takes place.
Where the book takes place, visiting her grandchildren, because although they're old enough, they're starting to come to the United States to go to college. There are still 5 of them back in Tanzania that if she didn't come to see them, she wouldn't see them,
right.
at all. So, she's with these kids right now, and I'm like, oh, Mom, I wish she wasn't going that far away, but.
It's an incredibly arduous trip.
It is. She travels. She doesn't travel alone anymore. So she travels, with either my brother or myself, or So she went back with my brother.
Well, there's so many fun parts of the book, and I love the safari, and then you guys go to a really meaningful place at the end. Would you like to speak about that a little bit?
Yes. Tanzania was also a slave port, although it wasn't to the extent of the east coast, or the west coast of Africa. So Tanzania, they tended to go from Tanzania to Europe, and then from Europe, and it was later in the slave trade. But anyway, we decided that, my brother had been talking about this community where, the slave trade was, and I wanted to go. So when we did our safari, and that was our fun birthday tribute to Mom, and we all love to go on safari. But then we wanted to have this sort of serious moment, so we came back and we went the further distance to go to visit Bagamoyo. And Bagamoyo basically means I lay my heart down, because the slaves would, if they knew they got to Bagamoyo, they would then they would leave Africa and never be able to return. So it was a very sad, somber, a final trip. And in fact, one of my favorite pictures comes from that moment in Bagamoyo, when after we've seen the slave trading area, we go for a walk on the beach, and it's sunset, and we're saying goodbye to my mother's grandchildren, my nieces and nephews, and we're just walking along the beach in Bagamoyo and remembering that, we have here, this generation, we're able to leave Africa and come back, and we can see each other, and we will see you again around the holidays next year at the same time. So it was a special moment in our trip, and powerful moment in our history.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful story and so well written. And I felt like I learned things as a, 40-something person. And I really hope it gets into the hands of so many children. And I wish the book incredible success.
Thank you. Well, it's a universal story. Grandparents have been holding together families for generations and generations. They are so important to all of us. I remember my own grandmother, and so my mother has, played a key role. She has 11 grandchildren. My brother, actually, I take that back. She has 13, although my brother provided 10.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yes.
So looking back over the course of your life,
Mm-hmm.
If you had a juicy secret to share for living a happy and successful and meaningful life, what would it be?
Juicy. It would be that you should have love in your life. I mean, that's the basis of all of our survival is really that we have love, and find it in all the ways you can, from nature, from God, from your relationships, from your family, and just embrace it.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for being with me. I'm
My
so
pleasure.
happy you came.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you for joining us.
On the Red Couch.